Hello and welcome to the Cardinal News of Virginia, a podcast from Cardinal News. We are a nonprofit news outlet covering Southwest and Southside Virginia at cardinalnews.org. The Cardinal podcast is sponsored by 5 Points Creative, a full-service award-winning marketing firm serving clients all over the U.S. from their headquarters in Roanoke, Virginia. I'm Dutchie Jessee for Cardinal News, and today we are talking with Bristol area reporter Susan Cameron, and then Danville reporter Grace Mamon. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're talking about casinos in Virginia today, which is why I have both of you here, because each of your coverage areas, or your beat, if you will, has recently opened a casino. And so we thought it would be a good time to just sort of summarize what's going on with them, what the process has been, and sort of how they're going, because it's been very recently that they've opened. So I'm going to start with Susan Cameron, who covers the Bristol, far southwestern Virginia region of Virginia for us for Cardinal News. And I want to talk about the Bristol Casino, which is a Hard Rock casino and hotel, right?
Correct, yes.
When did it open?
The temporary casino opened in July 2022, and the permanent casino just opened on November 14th.
Okay. Would that have been the state's first casino?
It was, yes.
Why Bristol, Susan?
Well, it got started in Bristol. It was in 2018, 2 Bristol businessmen announced that they were seeking a change in state law that would allow casinos, and they wanted to open one on the vacant Bristol Mall property in Bristol. And so that's how it all got started. All the others just joined on.
Yeah, so then a temporary one opened in 2022, like you said. How did that do, and how does that work? What is a temporary casino like physically like?
They opened in the old Belk building. They opened it in part of the mall property while they worked and constructed the other part. So they opened the temporary casino, and in the meantime, they were building the new one.
So what was the response like to the temporary one, as far as like people coming to it? Was it a big response, well received?
Oh yeah, it was an enthusiasm. It was a big deal when it opened, and they did pretty well, but they're doing even better now. They have more machines and bigger area. It's luxe, very nice.
Okay, let's get to Grace, who covers Danville for us. And Grace, there's a Caesars Virginia casino and hotel in Danville now that has just opened. Give us a little bit of a timeline on that. Was there a temporary casino first? Tell me about it.
Yes, and Susan kind of mentioned this, the change in state law that actually happened in 2019. So it's been a couple years since this whole process started. The General Assembly decided to pass legislation that would allow for casino resorts in Virginia. So before that, the state didn't have any casino resorts. They weren't legal, and Virginia was actually one of the only states, I think, that hadn't legalized casino resorts. But after that happened, there were 5 cities that were selected where a casino could be built, and that was Bristol, Danville, Norfolk, Portsmouth, and Richmond. And it went to a referendum to the voters in each of those communities, who got to decide whether or not they wanted a casino in their locality. So 4 out of the 5 passed the referendum. Richmond was the only place that didn't. So that was November 2020 that was on the ballot. And in Danville, the Caesars had already been chosen at that point as the potential operator for a casino if it was approved. So voters knew who exactly would be behind the casino, if it went through. I wasn't in Danville in 2020. I wasn't reporting here yet, so I don't know from personal experience, but from what I've heard, the response through that referendum, I mean, obviously it passed, so people were pretty enthusiastic about it, I think, on the whole. Since then, it's been a lot of construction. Ground broke on the permanent casino in 2022, August 2022. And then about 6 months later, there was the temporary casino opening, which was May 2023. And that was just a big, like, semi-permanent tent, like 40,000 square feet of tent space with slots and table games and electronic table games. And then finally, you know, after a lot of anticipation, the permanent casino opened in mid-December. So it's been open for a little over a month.
Great. So before we get to where they are now and the fact, they've obviously passed and casinos are legal in Virginia, let's talk about the arguments for and against, which I'm guessing lots of arguments against really are rooted sort of in our puritanical roots, basically, as a society and as, the state of Virginia, if you want to, put it that way. I'll start with you, Grace, since you were just speaking to the referendum. What were some of the arguments for and against a casino? And I don't know if the fact that it was in Danville is super relevant to that, but speak to that, if you will.
Yeah, so the 5 cities that were selected had to meet certain criteria. They were all had experienced some economic distress. So I think one of the big arguments for a casino was the economic benefit that it would bring. You know, the host cities get a portion of the gaming tax revenue, which in Danville has turned out to be pretty substantial. So I think that's probably the biggest, as well as it being a tourist attraction, especially in Danville. We're so close to the North Carolina border that we get lots of visitors from North Carolina, as well as from other parts of Virginia. And Danville has really worked to kind of bolster other attractions in the city and in the region so that people come for the casino, but they also have options of other things to do. So I think the economic benefits and the tourism benefits are probably the strongest arguments in favor of a casino. The arguments that I've heard against mostly relate to safety, if there's any like increased crime related to casino activity, and then just kind of like you said, general concerns or moral opposition to gambling. People are worried about an area where the median income is relatively low compared to other places in Virginia. You know, people going and spending their whole paycheck at the casino, and kind of that sort of negative effect.
Susan, when this was being discussed in Bristol, the Hard Rock Casino, or a casino in general, what kind of arguments did you hear for and against?
Well, the economic development was obviously the biggest thing, the biggest positive argument for it. But there was concern about gambling, people being addicted to gambling, and I think there was also a concern that it would just change Bristol. It wouldn't be the same place. But when the referendum was held, 72% of those people who voted for it. So it was pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, sounds like it. I know y'all have been to each one as they've opened officially, like the permanent location. So Susan, let's talk about Bristol, because I think that one opened first, the official permanent location down the Hard Rock Casino and Hotel. How did that go? What kind of things did you see? What did people tell you? Tell me about that day. That was November, right?
I didn't actually go to the opening.
Okay.
I wrote about it beforehand. I was there a couple weeks before, and there was like 1,000 people in the building getting ready for that. I mean, and it's nice. I mean, it's deluxe. Everything about it, all the finishes. It has 6 restaurants and a coffee shop. There's a Hard Rock store there that patrons can shop at. The hotel has 300 rooms, more than 300 rooms actually. So it's nice. I tell you, I was really drawn to, there are also, Bristol's a big music town, the birthplace of country music. And all the Hard Rocks have a lot of memorabilia in it. And they have over 200 pieces of memorabilia from music. And it's not just country music. There's a lot of country music because of that tie-in, but there's also Elvis's gold jacket is in the lobby of the hotel, and even Prince has a mural, and I was happy to see that. But I haven't been back, but I'm not a huge gambler, but I want to go back and see all that memorabilia and go through it, because it's what I saw was really worth going.
Grace, when Caesars Virginia opened in Danville in December, what's it been like? What was it like?
Yeah, so they had a big grand opening ceremony the day of, which was December 17th, I believe. So there was all kinds of fanfare. There was a race car parade that started in Danville's River District downtown, and finished at the front entrance of the casino. They had a lot of their Caesars, like actors, I guess, like people in costumes like you would see in Vegas. So like the girls with the feathers, they had Caesar there. And they got out of the race cars. And then they also had Dennis Rodman come to Danville, and he came up in a race car, and then he placed the ceremonial first bet at the Caesars Sportsbook, which is like the sports betting arm of Caesars. So there was a lot of excitement, you know. Then there was all kinds of speeches from local and Caesars officials. And I got there, I want to say like 2 hours before the doors were set to open, which was ahead of all of the stuff on the schedule for that grand opening. And when I got there 2 hours ahead of time, there was already a huge line of people waiting outside the doors, you know, before they had even opened. So it was a lot of excitement that first day. And then in the evening, they had a firework and drone show. So it continued all day.
Yeah, a very big deal, it sounds like. When you talk to people, I guess you had an opportunity to talk to people maybe in line or once they were in. Did you hear that, or did you notice if they were people that told you they're already people who like gaming and gambling, or were they a lot of curious people just wanting to see what all is in there?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was a mixture of both, especially because the temporary casino had already been open for about a year and a half. I think people were familiar with the Caesars product in Danville and the property. So there's a lot of people returning, you know, who are fans of the casino in Danville and wanting to play. And then I think it did generate a lot of interest from people who aren't gamblers and never had been to the temporary casino, just because, you know, it was an $800 million project. So the property is gorgeous. It doesn't look like anything else in Danville. And there's, like Susan was mentioning, there's restaurants, there's bars. So I think a lot of people just wanted to come and see the property itself.
Yeah, Grace, tell me more about what is physically in the building now, because Susan did give us a nice
Yeah.
picture of what's at Hard Rock. What's in Caesars, Virginia?
Yeah, it's a beautiful resort. There is a hotel attached, so there's 320 hotel rooms and then around 90,000 square feet of gaming space. So there's slots, there's live table games, electronic table games. There's a World Series of Poker room, and then there's the Caesar Sportsbook, which is the sports betting area. Aside from the gambling floor, there is Gordon Ramsay has a restaurant there. There's a couple other locally run restaurants. There's a spa. The hotel has a pool attached. And then there's meeting and convention space that kind of doubles as an entertainment venue. So I think they're planning to bring in some concerts and entertainers to that space as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot there. So do we have numbers yet about revenue generated, attendees, visitors, anything like that from either casino? And I'm going to start with you, Susan. Have we heard anything of how Bristol's doing?
Bristol's doing really well. December was their first full month of operation, and they had, let me grab my notes here.
Sure.
The adjusted gross revenues for December, which was the first full month of operation, was $20.6 million, which was a 35% increase over October, which was the last full month for the temporary casino. So it jumped 35% the first month. And that's the most that they've had of any month since they opened the temporary casino. So it's looking pretty good.
Yeah. Grace, do you know anything about how Caesars Virginia is doing? They opened later. So what's going on there?
Yeah, they're also doing well, although they did only have 2 weeks of operations in December. So the December revenue only reflect that last half of the month. But they brought in about $28 million in revenue in that time. And about 2 million of that will go to the city. So it's a good amount of revenue for both Caesars and for Danville.
Do you all know how many employees each casino has? What, Susan, do you happen to know that in Bristol?
Yeah, they have 1,400 with the permanent casino. They had 600 for the temporary, but they added about 800 in recent months. So
Are some of those full-time, I assume?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you know if the pay is good, if they're attractive jobs in that community?
They're the jobs are pretty well paid
Okay.
in comparison to a lot of jobs in the area. So pretty sought after. They've done a lot of training, brought in a lot of people to train them, and even had to buy some additional land around the casino for parking. So 1,400 people are working there now.
Yeah. What about you, Grace? What about Caesars in Danville?
A little bit less than that. They're about at 1,200 employees. The temporary casino had 400, so a big jump between the two properties. The thing that's interesting about that is there are a lot of Danville and area locals working there, doing like security jobs, the food and beverage jobs, but they also are dealing cards. So Caesars sponsored a card dealer school to train locals on how to become blackjack dealers or poker dealers or whatever it may be. So that was a really cool opportunity for a lot of locals who were interested in learning something, totally new.
I looked at their hotel rates for each facility. I was curious, and I noticed Caesars is up there per night. And I'm what I take that to mean is that it's kind of now. Susan did use the word deluxe for the Bristol Hard Rock Cafe, so it sounds like these are both just amazing facilities from that point of view, and they are brand new. But the Caesars Virginia, the rates were really high per night at the hotel. So is it like meant to be a luxury, experience from that point of view, Grace?
I think so. I was also surprised about the hotel room rates. The lowest one I've seen is like $350 a night, but they go all the way up to like $1,000 a
Yeah.
night, which is just like exponentially more than any other hotel rates in this area. And something that I've been told by the Caesars folks is that usually a hotel opens and it has a like history of supply and demand in the area, for a property like that. There's no other property like this in Danville, so they didn't have like a market history. I think the rates will adjust as that history is kind of established. That's what they've said, but I don't know that they'll go down all that much. I'm really not sure. So I know that it is supposed to be a luxury experience. I think Caesars has a lot of VIPs and people like that coming in to stay at the hotel. I can't imagine many Danville locals are paying to stay there.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of Danville, one thing I noticed on the website for Caesars is the view from. It is so interesting. Can you describe? I'm talking about the stacks,
Yeah.
behind the. So tell me about that, so that people get an idea of that.
Yeah, the casino resort is on an old Dan River Mills property. So that was the main industry in Danville for a very long time. It officially closed in 2006, and Danville has kind of been rebuilding its economy since then. But the footprint of Dan River Mills is still very much present in the city. And there's a lot of work to revitalize and rehabilitate old mill buildings to transform them into something new and represents Danville today. So Caesars is one example of that. They knocked down a finishing plant there to build the casino resort, but they decided to keep up 3 smokestacks that were part of the mill. And they're kind of nicknamed the Three Sisters. So they are right next to the hotel tower. You can see those smokestacks from anywhere on the Caesars property, basically. And they really provide a cool image, especially with the hotel tower now being the tallest building in Danville. You can see it from a lot of places in the city, and you can see the smokestacks right next to it. So it's kind of an interesting new, physical feature in the city as well, like the skyline of the city.
Yeah. Susan, do you live in Bristol?
I do, Bristol, Virginia.
I'm going to ask y'all each this question. So I'll start with you, Susan, and that is since you live in the community that you cover, which is ideal and wonderful. What have you heard that that you're comfortable sharing as far as just your everyday people anecdotally? If you're at Food City or something like that, what do you hear from people in the community about the casino?
I think people have been very curious. Particularly, I think they were waiting for the permanent casinos. I think there have been a lot of people who just wanted to go and see it. I think there are some local people who do gamble there regularly, but I think it's also a lot of out of town people. But I think people have been very impressed by it. I really haven't heard anything negative so far.
What about you, Grace? What's been your sort of ear to the ground experience anecdotally with it?
Yeah, the biggest thing I hear, whether people are excited about it or not, is just kind of the statement like, I can't believe this is in Danville. Like, I can't believe this exists here.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people are very excited and enthusiastic about it. And I have heard a couple people express some, concerns about traffic. There are a lot of businesses near the casino, and those owners are excited about the possibility of more foot traffic, but also concerned about like road traffic. There's street parking concerns, that sort of thing. So there's some of both, but if I had to say overall, would say most people are excited about it.
Yeah. So what is, what are things to look for in the first year of operation for each of these facilities? I mean, they're the things we've talked about. So like the money raised, people going and all that. Are there other things that you might not think about initially without giving away any scoops or anything, any ideas that you might have for down the road for Cardinal News? What are some things that we might be looking for coming out of each of these places? I'll start with you, Grace.
Yeah, I think the revenues will definitely be interesting to keep an eye on. Danville has a committee that they've set up to figure out how best to allocate that revenue that the city is receiving. So I think it will be cool as that money starts to get spent around the city, what projects will happen, where that money will go. And then I personally think it'll just be cool to see like what kind of concerts they bring in, what kind of shows they bring in. So that should be exciting when that comes out as well.
And what about you, Susan? What will you be looking for as a reporter, or what do you think the city is looking for, or the townspeople, community?
Well, I think that you can expect a lot of music. I think there will be continuous music, both local artists, musicians will perform there, but also the big names. They had Blake Shelton for their opening concert. And so mostly I think that's what you can expect. Grace mentioned the revenue from the casino. I just wanted to mention that one unique feature about the Bristol casino is that it has to share the revenue with 13 localities in Southwest Virginia. The founders of the casino from the very start said that they wanted Southwest Virginia to benefit economically, not just Bristol. And so there are 14 localities that are receiving money. The first year they got about $700,000 each, and it went up this past year. And I think they're really anxious to see what the full casino will bring, and they get those checks in September. So there's a lot of people benefiting.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up, Susan. And we'll be looking for all the updates coming from the two of you in Danville and in Bristol. We so appreciate your work and sitting down with us to sort of just give us an overview of what's going on with these casinos in Virginia. So Susan Cameron and Grace Mamon, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right. And thanks to everyone for listening. You've been listening to the Cardinal News of Virginia, a podcast from Cardinal News. Shout out again to our sponsor, 5 Points Creative, and also to Zach Shelton. Don't forget to get more news from us at cardinalnews.org. I'm Dutchie Jessee.